kind of need to have a number of the international umpires come down and help us in our national championships. And there's that reloop off the forehand that Coach Larry Hodges mentioned early on that we need to keep an eye on to see how comfortable Tong is in staying in the rallies. I'm wondering, Kagan, along with some of the junior girls that we saw earlier this morning play, how that time change and travel back from India could play a role with Kunal playing in the World Junior Championships over the last week.
Yes.
And then flying home and not only being able to stay at home for a couple hours, but then to fly again to Las Vegas.
Yeah, certainly a 12-hour difference will affect your play. You can't be playing in your sleep here. But on the other hand, we saw earlier in this tournament, Prachi came from Hyderabad, came here and beat her teammate, really the strongest member of the team, Lily Zhang. I wouldn't be surprised if that was the first time she ever beat her. So
kind of works in both directions, where
right.
depending on how much play you had, and I know the Olympic Committee, when they hand out their jet lag flyer, they estimate it takes 1 day for every hour of time difference to get fully acclimated. So these players are going to be playing a little bit on adrenaline and excitement that we're at the World Junior Championships, but they've so far looked pretty strong throughout the beginning of this tournament. And in this team match, we'll have a chance to see Kunal if he's able to get his game into play, but Tong is very strong off the bounce.
Well, I would say part of that adjustment is part of being professional. If you're traveling around the world playing, and they knew going in that when they went to the juniors that they would come back to Las Vegas to play a very important tournament, and they obviously had to prepare for that.
Right. You know, one tip that you can often do is to set your watches at the city that you're going to be arriving at as soon as possible, and maybe going to bed an hour or two earlier, and to start thinking about being on that time zone. Something that the East Coasters and West Coasters have to deal with when they go cross country. And a beautiful forehand reloop by Tong. Just so effortless. Great balance on his stroke. Kunal tends to play a little bit more comfortable off the table, sometimes in retrieving mode with good control of the angles. Tong tends to stay up at the table. That ball caught the edge. See if the umpires are able to correct that. And Kunal, with great sportsmanship, clearly points that out to give the point to Tong. Tong really needs to keep his serve short so that Kunal doesn't get that easy opening to start the offensive proceedings. One thing as a player, if your serve is going long when you're not trying to make it go long, often you're caught in between. Do you play an offensive shot or more of a controlled block? So both players need to keep their serves under control.
Bit of a gamble with that long serve there.
Yeah, very aggressive. First I thought it might have gotten away from him, that maybe it caught the edge of his paddle, but it looked like he went for it.
Those last 2 points to me looked like errors on Tong part. I mean, he got away with that first long serve. Kunal pushed it back, and then he missed. And he got the ball he wanted.
Right, that high pop-up. That's just adding a little bit more topspin to the ball to guarantee that it lands versus kind of nonchalantly stepping around and blasting it.
Kunal is coached by Stefan Faith, who's our USA men's team coach. Tong Tong by Cheng Yinghua, which is it's interesting that this team, Tong Tong and Nathan, both of these players actually kind of look like Cheng when they play. It's actually Nathan more than Tong Tong, but it's quite striking because Cheng's form is not, it's not picture perfect. There are certain hitches in it, and both these players have them. I don't think it's to the detriment, but it's a character sort of thing.
Yeah, we were mentioning earlier in the women's match with Han Xiao here, and Han had a little bit of the same thing in his mannerisms approaching the serve return, and clearly Han's backhand, which was always his strength, mirrored a lot of Chen's strength on the backhand side. So clearly the coaches have influence much more than just on the tactical elements of the game, but also in the basic technique, because as juniors they see their coach on the other side of the table, and that's what they're more likely to mirror or to imitate.
Learn a lot by the copying of them.
It's nice to have a coach that has a high level so that you can play against the coach. You don't see that so much in Europe, where the coaches tend to be more trainers and coaching a large number of players in a group. In the US we seem to have more one-on-one coaching. Really like that timing that Tong Tong has. Strong forehand opening, but really on top of the ball on the following shot.
Yeah, really takes it early.
And I think the experience that Kunal has coming back from the Junior World Championships, where he has seen.
And that's a service warning to Kunal for not removing the hand. If he does that again, it'll be a fault.
I really applaud Ken Potts, the umpire, for making that known early on so that the players don't have that occur at the last moment of a game and then get surprised when it's called. Clearly they don't need to give a warning if it's obvious, but I think the better umpires make sure the players know the strike zone, if you will, what to expect. That's just a little bit of a forced ball by Kunal. He was a bit fortunate at the end of game one of two of Tong Tong's easy errors. And this is where Kunal really kind of shines when he's off the table. He's really not out of position. But if you're patient enough, you should be able to find the opening when Kunal's in the backcourt. And Tong Tong really comfortable playing that opening loop by Kunal. If Kunal's able to move it around a little bit, he should find a less aggressive counterattack.
To me, it looks like Tong Tong is cheating a little bit to the forehand. He's surprised sometimes when the ball's to his backhand.
I know after the Junior World Championships, Michael Anderson, one of the top proponents of international junior circuit, said the one thing that he felt that Kunal could do to take his game to the next level is a little bit more physical off the table training, especially in the leg area. That he felt Kunal has a great table game, good hands, good spin, but doesn't necessarily have the leg strength to create the heavy topspins that the Chinese and the other European teams have. But clearly at a very young age, Kunal has a very bright future for Team USA. Again, Tong Tong with that silky smooth forehand loop off the bounce. Imagine how this match would be different had Tong Tong deuced it up or won the first game and really taken control of game number two. It's a nice, well-placed, almost double bounce serve by Kunal, catching Tong Tong in between strokes on the backhand side. And there's game number 2 to even up this initial match of the boys' junior semifinal team event, with Tong Gong now evening up the contest with Kunal Chodri at 1 game apiece. So both players getting some insight from their respective coaches, with Kunal with Stefan Fett, our national team and Olympic coach. And on the other side, Chen Yinghua giving Tong some advice. Chen, former Chinese national team member, twice US Open singles champion, multiple-time US men's singles champion, as well as an Olympian himself in Sydney in 2000. And Tong's primary coach, along with Larry Hodges at the Maryland Table Tennis Center. That ball caught the edge. Very well played backhand opening off of a deep serve.
Right to the middle.
Again, Kunal realizing that Tong's game and style are so off the bounce that he's making sure his returns go exceptionally deep to put more pressure. But Kagan, I think if Kunal continues to play a little passive, he's going to be in trouble. He needs to be a little bit more aggressive and not just serve and wait for the attacks to come at him.
Yeah, Tong has to be off balance. If Tong is stable in his positioning, he'll win.
That's a nice inside-out short serve, forcing Tong to move his feet just a little bit more. That is, I mean, that's such a smooth forehand. I mean, Kunal's giving well-placed balls, but Tong able to go over to the forehand side, just swing through it without any hesitation. Oh, beautiful positional block there.
Nice reaction there.
Really set up well by a deep push to the backhand. Not afraid of that opening, but able to just jump on top of it for a well-placed block. Seems as if Kunal is an extra half foot back. That gives Tong all the time in the world, where he can stay up with the attacks. Tong has to be a little bit more respectful of Kunal's loop.
Bit of a swat forehand there, but it gets in.
Timed it well, was able to add a little bit of kind of a smash to it.
I don't think either of these players will be very successful going for those chops there.
No, they need to be on the offensive channel. As you mentioned earlier, Kagan, how players tend to mirror or be very similar to their coaches. The other thing with Tong is just his general demeanor in between points. Very similar to Chen, where you couldn't read the opponent whether they were excited by the score or upset after maybe a missed shot. He is almost a stone face out there, not letting you know exactly whether he's excited after he's made a point or if he's frustrated.
Right, very, very good poker face. Whether it's trained or not is irrelevant.
Just looks like he's focused on the execution. He knows what he wants to do, and there's nothing that you're going to do about it. And on that last ball that Kunal looped in the net, that's where the leg strength could really make a difference. When you're using a lot more momentum in your attacks, need the ball to be up. When it's lower, beautiful forehand. step around there by Tong.
Good way to finish a game.
That's exactly what one of Tong's coaches, Larry Hodges, said to look for. Anytime he jumps on that slower opening from Kunal, that he'll be doing what he does on a daily basis at the Maryland Table Tennis Club, which is counterattacking with a lot of driving force.
Kunal doesn't look completely motivated at the moment. Throughout that match, a lot of times reacting a little bit rather than being assertive with the point.
He's definitely missing that spring in his step. He's not jumping on balls, and he's clearly not showing the emotional excitement.
Right.
Again, this could factor back to, again, you've traveled halfway around the world a couple days ago, but I know that World Champions Table Tennis Academy, and Stefan just, I don't know if you could see it on the monitor, but he just basically said to Kunal, look at your feet, what are they doing? They're not doing anything. They're just kind of there. And Stefan knows that the ramifications of this title event, World Champions wants to do as well as they can, especially after the last semifinal in the girls event where they lost to ICC. He wants to turn those losses into victories, realizing again, a number of their members are dealing with some 12-hour time differences here in Las Vegas.
I guess that's sort of the cost of success, but World Champions Table Tennis Academy is fair, you know, recognized as maybe one of the top 3 table tennis centers. And they should expect, in a way, to get to the final at least one of these events.
As we say in coaching, all strokes begin first with footwork. And if you're moving well and your opponent isn't, you have a sizable advantage. So Tong is continuing to be the driver of this match with his forehand counterattacks.
And even if you can't see the positioning with the table in the way, you can still tell because Kunal clearly should not want to go to the forehand, but Tong still gets it.
It's probably the most emotional display you'll see from Tong, where he stepped away from the table for a second. There's a nice backhand attack down the line by Kunal. Like Tong was a little bit too close to the table on that last backhand. Kunal keeping it deep and going a little bit more to the middle. And both players look like they feel comfortable going into these countering rallies over the table. Seems like if Tong can get his first loop in, that would change the dynamics a little bit versus playing off of Kunal's control opening.
Kunal seems pretty successful in this game, continually going to the backhand, going for a surprise to the forehand once in a while. Not a good time to make that mistake.
That's a scary thing, Kagan, and I'm asking you as a well-respected umpire and referee, for a player to catch the ball right after they serve it because they think it hits the net instead of having the umpire say something.
Yeah, they're taking a bit of a risk there. The player cannot call a let themselves. The umpire needs to call the let. So in a sense, they're catching the ball and asking the umpire for a let. If they don't get it, they lost the point.
I remember, unfortunately, during my early career doing that and being at the receiving end of the umpire and my opponent looking at me and saying that wasn't a net serve while I had the ball in my hand, and that was in the 5th game of a national title at 16 all, and it was like, whoops, shouldn't have done that. I learned the lesson the hard way.
Kunal is up 10-6 and still looks a little out of sorts.
That was a very weak loop off of a soft push. Barely made it to the net. However, Kunal able to tie it up, and just watching him walk back to the court, Stefan is bouncing and trying to get him energized, but very low on energy right now.
He might need some coffee in that bottle instead of water right now.
Maybe some Red Bull or something to get him going. He is kind of walking through this match right now.
You shouldn't have that kind of attitude after you've just won. Just won your game.
And the other thing, Kagan, that's really tough, it's not the first day back off these international trips. It's usually day 2, 3, and 4 when it really hits you, the time zone. Where
is that when your adrenaline runs out?
That's when the adrenaline runs out, and at 12 in the morning, it really feels like 12 at night with those bigger swings and time change. And I mean, he might be battling just trying to stay focused and awake, but Stefan's there to remind him, move your feet, get into this game. This is a key match at the national level. Everyone wants these bragging rights to say who is the best club, and how we decide it is on the table. So let's get things going.
Do you think this might be a more important match for Stefan than for Kunal?
Absolutely, absolutely. I think the programs have worked so hard all year long that I'm not saying he's mailing it in by any stretch, because he is traveling from around the world, but the ramifications of who does the best are going to be felt more in February and March when they're sending out their summer camp notices, and one club's going to be able to say we won the junior national title in the team event. I will say, though, that Kunal's partner, Kanak, has not had any of those issues. I've watched him play a number of key matches so far in this tournament, and his excitement, his attitude, his sense of urgency is always at a super high level. So I'm sure Stefan realizes the player waiting in the wings won't have this issue. But Tong right now with a 1-point lead. Now it's tied up at 3 apiece in game 5. Beautiful combination again by Tong, able to get the ball he wants, even though it's an offensive shot from Kunal. Really counterattacking without any hesitation to see if he can take a lead into this final portion of the game. Kunal looking a little frustrated right now.
Even though it's basically tied up. It is tied up.
And now showing a little bit more self-encouragement which is a good sign. Stefan trying to give as much encouragement by his clapping as legally possible. Nice little soft opening by Kunal, not putting too much spin on the ball, but just enough to force Tong to go into the net. Tong got away with a little bit of a serve that went long, and his counter loop caught the net to again keep the score tied up at 6 apiece. Nice plate, nice position there on that deep serve. Catching Tong a little bit in the middle area of the table, more to his elbow. Kunal stepping up, the most critical point so far to take an 8-6 lead. Oh, a beautiful forehand smash there off of a very shallow backhand opening.
A bit surprised that there have been no timeouts called. Kunal has 4 game points after looking down emotionally the whole match.
It'll be interesting, Kagan, to see if Kunal tries to force an offensive shot on these final match points, or if he waits for Tong to go for a mistake possibly. And there he has it. Kunal takes match number 1 in this junior boys team semifinal with world champions Table Tennis Academy.